So we are going to start the third Dhamma sermon of this Jhana Grove retreat. So may you give your consent by saying sadhu sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Kittavata paname bhogotama sacchanubodho hoti. Kittavata saccang anubujjati ti. Dear venerable brothers, dear venerable sisters, Dhamma friends. So we were discussing Canki Sutta, which is the 95th Sutta in Majjhima Nikaya. And we are trying to get some light, some guidance from this Sutta for our practice. And we yesterday discussed about 5 kinds of knowledge gathering, or 5 ways of, or 5 means how we can gather knowledge. And there Buddha explained the 5. Saddha, that is the faith. Ruci, that is the preference based on our desire. And then Anussava, that is the oral tradition coming from generation to generation, various teachings. And then Akara Parivitakka, that is where kind of one would do certain kind of reasoned reflection, one's own. And then the last one is called Dittini Jhanakkanti, where there is already established view and one also ponders about it and then come to a conclusion. So related to these 5, the main advice is that it is necessary to follow one of these or many of these, but keep an open mind without coming to a conclusion, because still you haven't reached the realization. Still they are somewhat superficial. You are learning, you are studying, you are memorizing. So all those things are necessary. So that's why Buddha mentioned the first stage as Sacchanurakkana, where you are trying to preserve the truth. So it may apply even to the Buddha's teaching. So if we want to preserve the truth, we can use any of these 5 methods. Either using the faith, we can learn the Dhamma, we can practice Dhamma, we can have some faith on Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. So likewise, through faith, we are continuing our practice. And similarly, through Ruci. So we may have a kind of a desire, have a personal preference. As a result of that, also we may be doing the same thing. And then since it is also coming from, to some extent, oral tradition, maybe our parents were Buddhists and probably we also may be following. Probably, no problem. So we can continue doing that. And maybe Akara Parivitakka, so that means you have kind of an intellectual capacity to understand the Buddha's teaching. You have got some sources, you investigate them. And so you felt, yes, it is correct, I better follow it. And that is also possible. Then the last one, Dittini Jhanakkanti. Say certain views are there, certain already established understandings are there, and you also try to recognize them, you also try to compare them, and then you are continuing. So this can be applied to even the Buddhist teachings. But the thing is, now we are continuing, and as we discussed yesterday, so Buddha's teaching on certain occasions have further understandings, further clarifications, and it is not mere blind faith. This may go into more concrete kind of understandings, realizations. So these things actually are achieved in a progressive manner, not immediately. And therefore, at the early stage, having a kind of an open attitude is welcome and sort of advised by the Buddha. And now, after Buddha mentioned this, now say for example, in the Sutta, it is mentioned like this: Saddha chepi bharadvaja purisassa hoti. Evam me saddhati. Iti vadang saccang anurakkati. Now that means a particular person who has learned the Dhamma, learned the teaching based upon the faith. Now he is telling like this: yes, I have a fair amount of saddha. I have a fair amount of faith. And he actually is protecting the Dhamma, protecting the, the the truth. Natveva tava ekansena nittang gacchati idameva saccam mogamanyan. Now Buddha there adds a little piece telling just by having that saddha and just by having some amount of partial knowledge, don't come to a conclusion, only this is correct, everything is false. So have to have a kind of an open mind. So that is where you're keeping some provision, keeping some space for further investigation, further practice. Now after mentioning that, so that indicate, so this part is actually common to all five. Buddha repeats the same thing for all five methods. So after mentioning that all these five are conducive to attain some sort of protection of the truth, and then Buddha indicates, I only declare here the protection of truth, but not kind of discovering the truth by yourself. That means you are touching the truth by yourself. I haven't declared that at this level. Now the question arises in the young Karpatika's mind. Now he has preached how to protect the truth, but now he is telling this is not yet the discovery of the truth. So how are we going to discover the truth? Now Karpatika is asking that question from this Buddha. Bhante, how are we going to discover the truth? Now that is also a very valid question. Now say for example, even today there are many teachings available, and we may be also searching in many different ways. And how are we going to conclude, okay, we have arrived the proper teaching. We have touched upon the proper teaching. So that is the question asked by Karpatika. Now Buddha goes on to explain that. Now there actually he starts recognizing a teacher. Now Buddha mentioned there is a kind of a refutation about a teacher, about a kind of a monk here in this particular sutta. And there a good reputation is available. And then a person is now Buddha advised that he has to do a little bit of an investigation about this particular monk or this particular teacher. Is there any kind of greed in this particular monk? Persuaded by that greed, influenced by that greed, he is sometimes telling even things without knowing that he knows. Without properly seeing, he is telling that he is seeing. Because of the influence of the greed. And not only that. And he says sometimes he is giving wrong instructions to others. And so that others also going through some lot of difficulties. Say they go through a lot of unwholesome deeds because of the wrong instructions given by the teacher, and teacher is influenced by greed. And then his verbal behavior and bodily behavior is also sometimes influenced by the greed. And then, is there any such kind of behavior which is noticeable? Now here actually Buddha advises us, so how to look at from the greed point of view. When greed is happening or greed is influence in one's mind, so there are different ways that it is manifesting. Sometimes if we are expecting kind of a big reputation, probably one can say, okay, I am so and so. And without really seeing, one can declare, I am so and so. Because expecting something, having kind of an ulterior motive. On the other hand, probably giving some wrong instructions. And the followers are going into wrong kind of sides and may get into arguments. And then his bodily behavior and verbal behavior sometimes represent how the greed is influencing his mind. So Buddha is asking to check, are there any kind of such appearance of greed in his mind? Through these different occasions, is the greed appear in his mind? And without stopping there, now Buddha even asks us to check the hatred. Based upon hatred, is this particular monk or is this particular teacher behaving like that? Say he's telling based on the hatred without knowing, he is telling, I know. Without really touching, he says, yes, I have realized. And he gives certain instructions based on hatred to his followers. And as a result of that, the followers get into various trouble, get into various unwholesome deeds, various arguments. And again, certain bodily activities conducted by this particular person is influenced by hatred. Verbal activities, verbal, speech, influenced by hatred. So are there any kind of such things appear in this particular person, in this particular teacher? So Buddha asks us to investigate. And then the last one is the delusion. So because of delusion, without having proper understanding, is he declare that I know things, I see things, because his own lack of knowledge. And because of lack of knowledge, because of delusion, is he giving wrong instructions to others, and others also going to wrong directions and doing various misdeeds. And he himself has a lot of various bodily misdeeds because influenced by the delusion. Verbal misconduct influenced by delusion. Now Buddha asks us to check. Now when we do such kind of an observation, and Buddha say, okay, if you can't trace something like that, that means the influence of strong greed, influence of strong hatred, influence of strong delusion. If you can't trace in this particular teacher such kind of a misbehavior, and now you need to check what is his teaching. Now here Buddha mentioned the teaching he teaches has to be profound. And it may lead to a kind of a peaceful state in one's mind. And it has to be very sublime. And it is not merely attainable by the reasoning. And then it has to be subtle. And it has to be experienced by the wise. Now these are very interesting factors we can look into. Now the teaching. Now there is a teacher, but he is teaching something. And Buddha mentioned, so this teaching, what he's talking, has to be a fairly profound one, not just mere, say, trivial ones. So the teaching has to be a profound one. And the followers who actually following is leading to a peaceful state of mind. And the not only peaceful, it has to be a sublime state of mind. And it is not merely attainable through just logic, through just reasoning. Now say there are various teachings available and there is no proper practical approach available, and you do a lot of thinking, a lot of manipulations, a lot of, say, contemplations, reasoning, and you think, okay, and now I have attained. Now Buddha says not merely using such kind of a thought related, say, reasoning related, rationalizing related thing that Buddha is talking. So there's an interesting term called atakkavacharo. So Buddha's teaching is atakkavacharo. It is not mere reasoning that through mere reasoning that one can touch it, one can realize it. So here Buddha highlights that also. The teacher who teaches Buddha's teaching as not merely attainable through reasoning. And then it has to be a subtle thing. And again, it has to be experienced by the wise. So it's experienced by the wise. That is Pandita Vedaniya. Now, they have to experience it. It's not just superficially understanding it, but the followers has to experience it. Now, that is how Buddha say to recognize a teacher. And now, in this sutta, after Buddha advising this to Kapatika, and now say, okay, you come to a conclusion, yes, what this particular teacher says is profound, and it is leading to a peaceful state of mind, it is sublime, and it is not merely attainable through reasoning, and again, it is subtle, and it has to be experienced by the wise. So let me also approach that teacher. Let me have a little bit of faith on that teacher. So that is how one is establishing faith on that particular selected teacher. It is not blindly following, rather, little bit of observation. That the follower is now approaching the teacher. So now there are 12 steps mention how the follower is coming or developing progressively into a kind of an understanding. Now Buddha mentioned saddhang niveseti. Now after doing all this investigation, now the follower has some saddha, some faith on this particular teacher. And then he visits him, upasankamati. Now he go and pay respect to the teacher. And as a result of that, now he associate that teacher, pairupasati. And then sotang odahati. Now he listens what this particular teacher is talking. What is his teaching? He lends his eye. Dhammang sunati. Now he hears the Dhamma. And then Dhammang dhareti. Not just listening, but he memorizes what he is talking. The teacher is now telling something, teaching something. So the follower is interested about it, and now he learns it. And he memorizes it. And after memorizing, Buddha mentioned attang upaparikkati. Now he reflect on his own. Is this correct? Is this valid? Is it taking us to the proper goal? So likewise, he do some own reflection. Attang upaparikkati. Then dhamma nijjanang kamanti. Now after doing such kind of inner reflection, Buddha says, so he come to a kind of a reflective acceptance. Not blind acceptance, but kind of a reflective acceptance. He did kind of a little thinking about it, pondering about it. And he found, yes, it is correct. And he come to a reflective acceptance. Now, after having such reflective acceptance, still things are superficial. Still he hasn't touched the truth. The Dhamma is there, it is correct, and he understood, yes, everything is fine. He is telling the good thing, he is telling the correct thing. I understood that, and is quite rational. And he come to a conclusion, yes, it is correct. Now, what is remaining? Now he has to practice. Now he gets a desire to practice. Now Buddha mentioned chando jayati. Now in him, that's a chanda, that's a seal, that's a desire to practice now. Now he want to internalize the Buddha's teaching. And then usahati. Now he is trying. Now he is striving. Now he himself is now striving. Now the teaching is available. He understood that to some extent. And now he is putting himself into the practice. Usahati. And while continuing, Buddha says, okay, kind of a tuleti is there. Now you do kind of a balancing of faculties. And it is not just striving. So all different aspects are there, and you are learning how to continue in this side, that side, and very different factors are there. So you do this kind of a balancing, tuleti. And then after that, padahati. And even though all these things are there, still haven't achieved. Now you need a kind of a further practice. So you need a kind of a striving here, continuous practice here. So you can say the padahati term is explaining kind of a continuous practice, and without giving up, even though you are quite convinced it is true, still you haven't realized it. So you need to continuously go on in your practice. So after that continuous practice, ultimately, so Buddha mentioned, pahitatto samano kayena cheva paramasaccang sacchi karoti panyayachanang ativijja passati. Now, ultimately, you yourself, the person, the follower himself, come to a real understanding. He himself now understands, yes, it is correct. I understood that. And even through his own knowledge, penetrative wisdom, he understood that. Now, this understanding, what is this understanding? So we can say it is Four Noble Truths, and we can say it is the kind of Noble Eightfold Path, or we can say, on the other hand, the dependent origination, what is Samuppada. So likewise, many different ways with respect to the Buddha's teaching we can connect here. Anyway, we'll keep that. Maybe if time permits, we'll talk that on tomorrow. But ultimately, so this Satchanubodha is what discussed in this level. And Buddha mentioned this is just Satchanubodha. Now you arrived the truth. You discovered the truth. Previously, you were going here and there and looking at various things. You couldn't really sure about it. But now it's very much like you are sure about it. Satchanubodha. And later Buddha mentioned still not you are Satchanupatti. You are not fully connected with it. And then actually Kapatika asks how you are achieving Satchanupatti. So we'll discuss that tomorrow. Now, in the commentary, so this Satchanubodha is very much referred to attaining Sotapanna. So as we discussed, as I hinted yesterday. So when how one becomes a stream winner. So how are we sure whether we are a stream winner? So actually the question in the afternoon is one of that. So this is interesting question, and so there's kind of a fair amount of information available in another sutta called Kosambya Sutta in Majjhima Nikaya. So there Buddha gives a kind of a 7 type of criterion. Those are called Mahapaccavakkana Jnana, great reviewing knowledges of a stream winner. So 7 great reviewing knowledges of a stream winner. Now, what Buddha mentioned here is whoever is practicing, after he comes to a fair amount of understanding, and he has to put into this criteria and see whether he gets the positive answer every time. It is not mere taking a certificate from someone and thinking that I am a Sotapanna and something like that, or overestimating oneself, or teacher giving kind of a title. Rather, Buddha is giving a very comprehensive inner reflection. It's a kind of an honest reflection here. So depending on one's, say, understanding of the Dhamma, realization of the Dhamma, so this inner reflections have to give a positive answer. The first one, Pariyutthanang ajjattang appahinang. So that means, so internally, are there any obsessive defilements? So now, for example, just to explain you, now suppose you are driven by anger and you couldn't notice it, and immediately you shout at someone and you get into an argument, and later, after a couple of days, you regret about it. So that means without your notice that the power of anger, the Vyapada, the Nivarana Vyapada, has overwhelmed you. It can happen even with Kama Chanda. Say you are being driven by sensual desire and you involved with something, and later you regret about what has happened. So you couldn't even notice that, what is happening in your mind because of these defilements. And sometimes it may be the regret. So you are continuously regretting about something and you can't stop it. It has become kind of a rumination. Again and again going and on and on. You can't stop it. So obsessive thinking. And sometimes you have a lot of doubts. You can't stop doubting. And a lot of doubts are going on and on. So your mind is in a kind of a perplexity, kind of a confusion, and you have no clarity of mind. And sometimes it's continuously kind of lethargic, lazy kind of an attitude. Now these are showing how these obsessive defilements are attacking the mind, influencing the mind. And on the other hand, obviously you get into arguments with others, quarrels with others, and kind of fighting with others. So all this indicates a fair amount of obsessive thinking, obsessive defilements. Because of the obsessive thinking, the defilements are growing, and you are under such kind of very gross level of influence coming from the defilements. And on the other hand, now this reflection what Buddha mentioned here is, now when you are reflecting your own mind, do you see such kind of an influence of defilements, obsessive thinking in your mind? Or are you getting an answer, no, I don't have such thing. Sometimes maybe lust arising, but I notice it. It can't overwhelm me. Sometimes anger arising in me, but it can't overwhelm me. Sometimes laziness arises, but it can't overwhelm. Sometimes regrets happens, but it can't overwhelm me. So likewise, there may be little doubts, the major ones, but not overwhelming. So you come to a kind of a noticing that mind is fairly calm. So thinking has become less. Obsessive thinking has become less. Overthinking has become less. And you prefer calming down the mind. You prefer non-proliferative mind. So typically the opposite is common in the typical human beings. Now say for example, in the Dhammapada verse, Buddha mentioned, papanchabirata paja nippapancha tathagata. So these typical worldly beings are addicted very much into obsessive thinking. Now say for example, if we get a kind of a rest period. Now suppose that you have nothing to see, nothing to hear, nothing to smell, nothing to taste. There is no significant touching going on. What are you going to do? How about thinking? You take a back seat and you think, oh, what's going to happen in the future? What will happen in the Ukraine war? So a lot of thinking. You have many things to think about the future, about the past, and what is going on in the present moment. So whatever the sights coming through your eyes, sounds coming through your ears, smells, tastes, and everything is promoting thinking. And we can't stop thinking. Continuously thinking, and I love thinking. So that is the typical way that we operate. So that's why Buddha mentioned. So these people, full mundane people, they obsessed in this thinking. Papanchabirata paja. So they are very much addicted in overthinking. On and on, going on and on thinking. Now, in the first instance, so we have to have a different answer here. So am I have kind of a different way of looking at it? Is this obsessive thinking has become less and less as a result of this practice? Am I experiencing even a very silent mind? No obsessive thinking. And even kind of thinking going on, is it happen under my knowledge? Mind may be thinking, I might get angry, I might get lustful, but within my supervision. So are we getting such kind of an answer? So this is the first criterion Buddha mentioned here. So you can see it is not simply rational reasoning kind of an achievement. It requires a fair amount of practice. So all these reflections actually are more practical. So what Buddha advice here is that so one has to honestly reflect on one's own mind and check whether such kind of obsessive thinking, obsessive defilements, which are overwhelming myself, are not present at the moment, right? In me now. So this is the first criteria. And then, so this is Buddha mentioned. So this is the patamajnanang adigatang ariyang lokuttarang asadharanang putujjanehi. Now this is the first knowledge, which is sublime, which is noble, which is supramundane, and not shared by the ordinary people. Now you see, now these are a different way of looking at our practice. So is our practice led to this kind of an understanding, this kind of a mental behavior within us? So this is first criterion. Now the second. Imannuko ahan ditting asevantu bhaventu bahuli karantu labhami pacchattang samatang labhami pacchattang nibbutinti. When I am continuing this practice, what I am doing right now, am I achieving further and further tranquility? Am I getting further and further, nibbutinti? Nibbutin means, we can say, further tranquility or calming down of defilements, no inner burning. So the continuation of the presently selected path, is it leading to further calming down, further, removing defilements, so that inner burning become less and less? Am I getting a positive answer for this? When I pursue, when I develop this particular practice, this particular view, do I personally obtain serenity, personally obtain quenching of defilements? Now, that is something that personally we have to experience. It is not that we are looking at in a book, someone is placing a title. Rather, internally, honestly, when we are looking at our own mind, when compared to, say, 1 year ago, what is the state of mind right now? Can you see a reduction of defilements? Can you see the reduction of inner burning? Can you see more tranquility in your mind, calming down in your mind? So if so, the path we are continuing, path we are following is true. It's a correct path. Now, if you can't recognize such kind of a significant difference in your progress, so there may be a problem. That is where we have to have a kind of a reflective attitude, open mind, even to change the path. Now, the answers of these questions have to come positively if we are following the proper path. Now, therefore, on the other hand, we can say the path has to lead to that direction. Not too much thinking, not too much obsessive on and on proliferation, but calming down, relaxing, inner tranquility, inner silence, less burning. And now the third. Now here actually the third one is more kind of a comparison. Now Buddha say, now you are experiencing something right now. Now here talking about the stream winner, and he is experiencing some sort of inner calmness, inner clarity, less of defilements, and he knows kind of a path. And now he reflects, is there any other religious leader, any other religious follower outside this Buddha's dispensation? Are they going to have this kind of an experience? And there he gets a kind of an answer, no, they can't be. Because this is fairly unique to the Buddha's teaching. So this is a very interesting point. So that is where we can say he has a unwavering saddha, unwavering faith on the Buddha, unwavering faith on the Dhamma, unwavering faith on the Sangha and his own practice, because he found, yes, this is mentioned in this Buddha's dispensation, I can't find it on something else. Now he has that kind of an unwavering faith. So that's the third one. The fourth one. Fourth one is also very interesting. Now, typically, nowadays it is quite common. Now, if you do a mistake, now say particularly an ordinary person does a mistake, typically he wants to cover it. He wants to hide it, isn't it? So without revealing it, without making it popular, making it aware of the others, he somehow wants to hide it. Because he wants to show that he's a pure person. He is a good politician, right? So the next election, he may get more votes. So even though he do a lot of things, but he want to cover everything. Now, the opposite has to happen in this situation. So here Buddha mentioned, so if there is a mistake happen in this particular person, now he is not an arahant. So he is just a stream winner. So still there is some amount of lust available, some amount of anger available. And only few defilements are abandoned. Still more, sanyojanas, fetters are available. Now if you consider the 10 fetters, among 10 fetters, how many fetters are abandoned in a stream winner? 3 fetters are abandoned, right? We usually know Sakkaya Ditthi, Vicikicca, Silabbata, Paravasa. We all know that only the personality view, then the doubt, and the various, a kind of a wrong conclusion that different rituals, observances will lead to purification. So there is no such acceptance in him. So those 3 fetters are only abandoned. How many are remaining? So 7 still remaining. So there could be even kind of mistakes happen because of the influence of those defilements. But the interesting thing here is this person never hides them. So Buddha mentioned, Desetva vivaretva uttani karitva ayatin samvarang apajjati. So if he does any kind of a mistake, he immediately, reveal it. He immediately confess it. He don't want to hide it. He don't want to show that he's a saint. He don't want to say that he's an arahant, never doing any mistakes. If he does any mistake, he simply reveals it. And he not only reveals, and he, I think Sangvarang Apajati, he tries his best to avoid such mistakes. He may continuously, correcting himself. He understands still defilements are there. I sometimes get overwhelmed by them. So I did a mistake. Okay, no point of hiding. Let me reveal it. So he may approach, now if he's a Sangha member, so Buddha mentioned he may approach one of his colleague, another Sangha member, he confess it, he do the Apati Desana, and he reveals it. And maybe if he's a lay follower, maybe going to another monk or a teacher or another elder person, and he reveals it. And he doesn't want to hide it. So this is the 4th one. 4th criterion Buddha says that a stream winner would have. Now, if we are looking at our own mind, and we may recognize, okay, at this particular point I did a mistake. At this particular time I did a mistake. So if you are reflecting like that, so have you revealed that? So did you reveal those mistakes? Or you want to hiding that? These are very interesting. These are honest reflections. So, we as human beings, not being arahants, so time to time we may done various mistakes. So are we humble enough to reveal that? Are we humble enough to accept that? So that indicates we are well grounded. We become more and more human, not behaving like, very kind of extraordinary people. Rather, we accept, yes, I have mistakes. I still have defilements. So sometimes because of the influence of available defilements, I did this mistake. So let me well grounded. Let me go and ask for forgiveness. So do I have such kind of a behavior? So this is another point that Buddha asks us to reflect within ourselves. So if we get a positive answer, that means, yes, I am humbly went and I am capable of revealing that rather than hiding things. So this is the 4th criteria. And now another interesting point is there. Now suppose here Buddha talks about the monks, and it is valid for the lay people as well. Now these people are quite capable people. They are not ignorant people, they are quite capable people. And it is not only in the Dhamma, but even in the other mundane activities, they are quite capable. Now, say as a teacher, as a student, as a housewife, as a kind of a, say, another profession. So you have a lot of other responsibilities. So you have to involve with those responsibilities. You have to interact with others, and you have to spend a lot of time on behalf of various things. Many things to get involved. Now, when you get involved with various other activities, those are not really related to your practice. Now, here the point Buddha highlights is, even though you spend fair amount of time on all those different external activities, you keep an eye on your practice. So Buddha mentioned, where you have Atako assa tibba pekho hoti. Adisila sikhaya, adichitta sikhaya, adipanya sikhaya. Tibba pekho hoti. So you have a keen desire to further your practice, to improve your sila, to improve your tranquility, to improve your wisdom. So even though you are engaged with so many things, once you get a chance, you quickly try to improve your practice. So that is a kind of a ongoing desire in this particular person. Now, very interesting simile here Buddha gives. Now, he says there is a cow and he's been, tied to a pole, and she has a little calf. Now, she's feeding herself. She's, looking at grass, and she's eating grass. And what else she would do? Time to time, look at the calf as well. So, she has to feed herself, but time to time, she's looking at calf. Is he all right? Like a mother. So, even though you engage with so many day-to-day activities, suppose you have an infant child, and he's now getting up and doing various things, and now only he's, running and all these things. But you have to prepare your meals and wash your clothes and everything. So many things are there. But time to time, mother looks after the child, isn't it? So Buddha mentioned like this. So even though this practitioner has a lot of other responsibilities, has a lot of many other engagements, he do not neglect his practice. So when a chance available, he quickly go and continue his practice. So this is so internally, once we reflect in ourselves, do we have such kind of a desire in ourselves? So that is something we need to honestly see. So am I continuously engaged with everyone else's things, so many other external things, completely neglecting practice for years? So are we in that category? Or am I engaged with so many things, but time to time, whenever I get a chance, am I looking at my practice? Am I continuing my practice? So do I have that kind of a attitude? So it's a kind of another honest reflection. Buddha say, available in a Sotapanna, available in a stream winner. And then the other two actually related to the Dhamma. Now we already covered 5 criterions here. And the sixth one is where now he hears Buddha's teaching. And when he hears the Buddha's teaching, here Buddha mentioned, Attikatva, Manasikatva, Sabbachetaso, Samannaharitva, Ohitasoto Dhammang Sunati. So wholeheartedly, with lending his ears and attentively he is listening. So when Dhamma is being taught, he gives attention, engages it with all his mind, eagerly listening when Buddha's teaching is taught. So do we have that kind of an attitude? So we need to reflect. So when Buddha's teaching is being taught, are we simply neglecting that? Are we simply ignoring that? And do we think that we know everything? I don't need to listen to that. Or am I have a kind of a eagerness to learn? So what is being taught? So I might still have a kind of a keen eye on that. So Buddha mentioned this is another criteria you need to check. The last one is a result of that. So when you engage with that kind of eager listening, so time to time you become really happy. Because you yourself have some kind of a understanding, and you yourself have some kind of a realization, and time to time you get connected with the teaching. Labati atta vedam, labati dhamma vedam, labati dhammopasanhitam pamujjam. So when the meaning is mentioned in a particular thing, and you immediately connect. And as a result of that, you get kind of inner joy. You feel really happy about what is being said. because it is not kind of far from you. It is something that you are experiencing. So it is now connected with your own experience and what is being taught by the Buddha. So it is not external to you. And it is something that you are experiencing and it is being taught by the Buddha, and you get connected and you feel really, either gratitude towards the Buddha, you really connect with the Dhamma, and as a result of that, you are quite happy. So this is the seventh criterion Buddha mentioned, available in a stream winner. So it is mentioned here, Evan sattanga samannagato ko bhikkave arya savako sotapatti phala samannagato hoti. So when a noble disciple is thus possessed of these 7 factors, he possesses the fruit of stream entry. Now you can see, these things are not mere, just by hearing Dhamma, can you achieve this? Everything? You need some amount of practice. You need to reflect your own mind. You have to be well-grounded. So these are not easy things also. Can you achieve this all of a sudden? Very difficult. If you can achieve it well and good, no problem. But nowadays, in this particular world, with a lot of obsessive thinking and all bombarding of advertisements and all these things, having a very complicated minds. So are we going to have these things, these kind of reflections and get positive answers immediately? I doubt about it. So it requires a fair amount of practice. So that's why we have to be sort of realistic in terms of these reflections. Even the very first one. Say, because of the practice, are we having kind of an inclination now to calming down defilements, calming down obsessive thinking, and kind of an inner preference for that kind of a relaxed, calm, quiet mind? So do we have that kind of a direction in our practice? Is our practice led to such kind of a direction? Am I experiencing such thing? Internally, do I have such kind of a desire for that? Or am I continuously talking, as we just discussed during the discussion? I might prefer too much talking, thinking and all sort of inner discussion going on, inner chatter going on. Still haven't experienced the freedom in the chattering. So these are the points that we need to really highlight, particularly in the Vipassana practice. The very first one is a must. So, and in another sutta, in the Bhaddaka Sutta, so Venerable Sariputta mentioned, who is preferring the state of Nippapancha, who is preferring this calming down of conceptual proliferation, he is very much like inviting Nibbana, the state of Nibbana. So, Papancha Vupasama, the calming down of conceptual proliferation, obsessive thinking, overthinking, is one essential part of Vipassana. So therefore, that's why mere reasoning can't take you there. Just by mere thinking, intellectualizing, so it can't take you to Nibbana. So it is a different way of approach, we can say. So if we all think that too much thinking and all the philosophers have to attain Nibbana then. Now great thinkers are there, no? Now we call them great thinkers. So is the Buddha a great thinker? What do you think? Is the Buddha a great thinker through thinking that he taught the Dhamma? So you can see it's a different way of looking at. So we can't say of Buddha as a great thinker. So he has shown us a different path. So it seems like there is another way of knowledge available apart from thinking. So we are going in the wrong direction in that sense. Now in the science and all today's different kinds of philosophies, it requires fair amount of thinking, rationalizing, reasoning. Many things are there. And ultimately you come to a kind of a conclusion. And here the point is, Buddha mentioned it is atakkavachara. Just mere reasoning will not take you there. Reasoning also one factor, as we can see in the 5 factors, either dittini jhanakkanti, or in the other one, what is that, the akara parivitakka. So fair amount of thinking is there, rationalizing is there, but that alone is not enough. So you need another aspect, another dimension into the practice. So that is why this samatha practice, vipassana practice are taking us into another dimension, and using which actually you are developing certain other skills in the mind. The calming down of the defilements, nivaranas, hindrances, and then developing certain other spiritual qualities, and using which you are developing kind of a penetrative knowledge. And that penetrative knowledge is completely different from what you probably have learned or heard through the book. It is your own knowledge. It is your experiential knowledge. So once one has such kind of an experiential knowledge, now probably we can put these criteria and see, so am I a stream winner now? So because nowadays people are so eager to become, Bante, am I? Sometimes we get blamed at Nissarana because we never give titles. We never say someone, okay, now you are a Sotapanna, now you are a Sakadagami, now you are an Anagami. We never say. So at the end of the retreat, sometimes we get a, kind of a chit, kind of a commentary. So you all monks are encouraging us again and again to practice, but never tell now I have achieved Sotapanna. But when are you going to tell me that I am a Sotapanna? So actually it's very difficult. How can I say, am I a Sotapanna? So I have to put this and see. It's a kind of an inner reflection. It's an honest reflection. You can't say that I am a Sotapanna. I can't say you are a Sotapanna. So it's a very much, we have to put this criterion into our own mind and see. So Buddha has very clearly mentioned these things. So it is therefore, actually, Venerable Jnanarama, the great preceptor who started this Nissarana, he says that someone is publicly telling, I am a Sotapanna, very sure he is not a Sotapanna. So that's the way that he is telling. Because it's not something that you throwing a party here, but it's a very honest kind of a way of looking at your own mind. So ultimately what we are recognizing are the defilements, and we become more and more humble human beings. It is not that we are being a very special people. We understand, okay, this is just a common thing. I was so mad about myself as a huge person, but now I understood there is no such thing. How are we showing up ourselves? Because of the ego, we can say, because of the sakkaya ditthi, the personality view. So we want to highlight ourselves. So when the sakkaya ditthi is removed, what would happen? Then you become a kind of a normal, innocent being, right? That's it. Then you don't want to highlight yourself. You don't want to show off yourself. As much as possible, you want to get away from others. Mind your own business. As Bhante Dhammajiva says, be mindful, mind your own business. Isn't it? No point of, highlighting yourself and showing off yourself and trying to attract others. That is out of business. So here Buddha's teaching, therefore, very much our inner reflections are the ones giving us a kind of a true assessment about our own practice. Therefore, so rather than another person and asking from another person to give a certificate, so we have to continuously practice and time to time put this criterion into ourselves and see whether we get a positive answer. Am I leading to this kind of a area? Am I leading to this kind of a tranquility in my mind? Am I feel a reduction of defilements? Less inner burning, more calming down. Mind attains sometimes complete peace without any thoughts. No any obsessive thinking. And am I humble enough to reveal my mistakes? And am I get connected with the Dhamma? Time to time when a proper Dhamma talk being heard, am I really get happy about it? Honestly happy about it. So likewise, so these are very practical references, practical reflections. So that's why Buddha mentioned, if you are having a positive answer to this, probably you may have achieved. Now, there's an interesting thing that we can add here. So, in the Satipatthana practice, so there are 3 stages actually we can check in. The first stage is actually very much about the establishment of mindfulness. That is the term Satipatthana. So, you can establish mindfulness either in bodily activities, bodily phenomena, or various feelings, various mental states. You can establish mindfulness. So that is the Satipatthana. And the next stage is what you call as the Satipatthana Bhavana. Where you, after you establish mindfulness, now you need to continue your investigation. So how these elements are behaving, how these, postures are behaving, how these different feelings are behaving, how these different mental states, thoughts are behaving. Now you do a very thorough investigation. Samudaya Dhammanupassīvā kāyasmiñ vihirati, Vaya Dhammanupassīvā kāyasmiñ vihirati, Samudaya Vaya Dhammanupassīvā kāyasmiñ vihirati. So that is where the possibility of knowledge is developing, the wisdom is developing. It's a penetrative knowledge, experiential knowledge. It is not a book knowledge. Once you establish mindfulness, so that is not the completion. Now you need to do that very careful investigation. It may be bodily phenomena, it may be feelings, it may be thoughts, mental factors. So all the 5 aggregates, now you are thoroughly investigating. So as you thoroughly investigate those 5 khandhas, 5 aggregates, now a fair amount of knowledge is developing, gathering, because of this thorough investigation. And as a result of that, because of the gathering of momentum of these various knowledges, vipassana knowledges, there may be a possibility that it may let go of everything and come to a kind of a temporary freedom. That's what we discussed. Anissitocha vihirati nacakinci loke upadiyati. Now you are not grasping anything in the world. So mind is capable of aware of things without grasping anything, without associating anything. So kind of a freedom is there, but very temporary. Why? Still defilements are there. Again it goes and grasps. But the interesting thing is, you can repeat this process. Say using Kayanupassana, suppose that you are doing elements meditation and you engage with that practice and you are able to achieve that freedom. Next day also you doing the same process, you are able to repeat the same process. Next day also you can repeat the same process. Now you become somewhat confident about that process. Now you are somewhat certain about the process. Okay, when I am continuing in this way, in this particular meditation technique, yes, after some time, now mind gets released. Now mind has no such kind of a noticeable grasping. There is no any kind of a tension. There is no any kind of a sense of I. So slowly you start noticing that state. There is no I there, there is no person there, there is no kind of an individual there, and there is no grasping there. So mind is somewhat peaceful, and as we discussed, fairly boring. So a kind of boring state, not agitated state. So you become kind of noticing that state. So that state has to be now kind of expand. Am I able to achieve this state further? And as we discussed, so Buddha's teaching encourages us to maintain that. So because it is somewhat dispassionate. It does not invite any kind of sense desire to happen. Rather, it's just calm, relaxed, peaceful. So you are now capable of achieving it using a particular method. And as we are continuing and very much like consolidating that state, probably you can use that state as a method or kind of a reference to recognize various defilements. How eye making happens. How the personality view can happen. How various lustful thoughts appear. How angry thoughts appear. Because you are now familiarizing with a very calm state of mind, relaxed state of mind, unattached state of mind, non-grasping state of mind. So when it becomes more and more purer and purer, so this, if it is a perfect kind of non-grasping state, so there can't be any eye making. There can't be any personality view. Now there's a very interesting sutta I like to connect here. So one time Venerable Ananda, with a lot of gratitude, mentioned to the other monks. He's mentioned, colleagues. So when I ordained as a young monk, Venerable Punna Mantaniputta was very helpful to me. And he given me a frequent advice. Upadayatiko avuso ananda asmiti hoti no anupadaya. Ananda, this sense of I, the personality view, happens because of some kind of a grasping. Without grasping, this personality view can't happen. What are we grasping? Either we may grasp the bodily aggregates, that means the form aggregate. Either we grasp feeling aggregates. Either we grasp perceptions aggregate. Either we grasp formations aggregate. Either we grasp consciousness aggregate. By grasping any of these aggregates, this personality view, I making, sense of I, going to happen. Now, if we are able to maintain a pure non-grasping state of mind, can you say I can happen? Personality view can happen? That means without grasping, this I can't happen. The personality view can't happen. So that means immediately we may not get the most pure form of non-grasping state. There may be shades of feelings available, shades of perceptions available. So that's why when we are going through our practice, immediately we can't say that we are coming to the very perfect kind of a non-grasping state, anisita state. But as we are continuing that, so all these shades of feelings, shades of perceptions, shades of signs may go a little bit far away. They become weaker and weaker. And one day, probably, we may get a fair, perfect form of non-grasping state. A possibility of achieving a stream winner. And the problem is, now you might realize, so, even though I achieve this, how am I going to perfect it? How am I going to maximize it? Why am I losing it? Why I am going back to the grasping? Now you understand, okay, still defilements are there. Still hindrances are there. Till the power of knowledge is available, I am able to maintain non-grasping state. The moment the power of knowledge become less, again mind go and grasp. Now you recognize I need a kind of a solid path. What is that path? Noble Eightfold Path. So there Buddha mentioned the third stage of Satipatthana, Satipatthana Bhavana Gaminincha Patipada. Now a person realizes by himself, yeah, I need a kind of a solid path. I need to maintain proper sila. I need to somewhere, if there is something go wrong, as we just discussed, if I do mistakes, it's better I reveal it, I better confess it, I better purify my sila. So if there is no clarity, again I go and grasp. So I better maintain proper samadhi, the clarity of mind. I need to recognize defilements at their early stage. So I need further understanding about this samadhi. I need to maintain samadhi. And you understand the value of samadhi. And more than that, so you understand still defilements are there, still latent tendencies are operating and influencing my mind. And I need more wisdom to recognize them. So there you understand the wisdom part, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. So Buddha mentioned this is the third part of the Satipatthana. So you can refer Satipatthana Vibhanga Sutta available in Satipatthana Samyutta. So very clearly these three stages are mentioned. Satipatthana, Satipatthana Bhavana, Satipatthana Bhavana Gaminincha Patipada. So this Satipatthana Bhavana Gaminincha Patipada is nothing other than the Noble Eightfold Path. So when one achieves, when one recognizes, when one appreciates Noble Eightfold Path, so that is where he recognizes the stream. So what is the stream winner? What is the stream? The stream is the Noble Eightfold Path. So Venerable Sariputta answers that very clearly, and someone asks, Bhante, what is the stream? What is the Sutta? And Venerable Sariputta says the Sutta is the Noble Eightfold Path. And you achieve the Noble Eightfold, or rather you come to the Noble Eightfold Path. You recognize the value of the Noble Eightfold Path. You start practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. And interestingly, there's another sutta called Padesa Sutta. Somebody asked from Venerable Anuruddha, why this a person is called Seka, a trainee? And he says, when someone has practiced among these four Satipatthanas, if one has practiced to some part of it, and he may have achieved to some extent, and he is a trainer. Then the next sutta is called Samatta Sutta, and he is asking, who is then Aseka? And he says, he has practiced to a higher level all these four Satipatthanas, so that is why he is called an Aseka, that's an Arahant. So that means even using one Satipatthana, one can become a Seka, one can become a trainee, one can become a Sotapanna. But in order to purify totally, complete purification, we may have to have a fair understanding about all four. That is the Aseka. And so with that, I like to conclude today's Dhamma sermon. So you all are attentive listening, so probably so we will continue tomorrow about the next part of this Dhamma sermon. Thank you very much for participation.